Hey everybody, Dave Hagan here. I recently heard that a quarter of all the millennials have amassed $100,000. Nice piece of work. But let's talk about that today on the Financial Wellness Podcast.
Welcome to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. Here is your host, financial problem solver and talk show host, Dave Hagan.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Welcome everybody to the Financial Wellness Podcast, or the TFWP, as we like to call it. In fact, we've got the website called the financialwellnesspodcast.com, and we're going to change that. I don't know if you knew this, Brian. We're going to change that to TFWP.com.
Oh, very nice.
Just a little easier to deal with, right?
There you go.
As everybody can tell today, with me, as always, Mr. Brian Reed. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Always good to have you here. You know, I was looking on the internet, kind of kicking around, and I came across this new report from Bank of America. And this report was showing that millennials, which are a good portion of our listeners, are saving more and their money habits are improving. So I was happy to hear that, and I dug into that report and went to the Bank of America website. And they've got this report called the 2020 Better Money Habits Millennial Report. And they explored the money mindset of today's young adults, which I guess is ages 24 through 41. And it revealed some of their financial priorities, some of the trade-offs they're willing to make, some of the stressors that they're having, and how they're balancing it all along the way. So I'm thinking, why does Bank of America, which is like one of the banks that I use, why do they go through this report and do this survey and go through all this effort? Well, they're trying to understand better where young adults are doing financially, how they're doing financially, what they're going through. And they're trying, of course, to, when they publish it, push the millennials to their better money habits portion of their website. Basically, they're trying to drive millennials to their personal finance website. And I guess I'm okay with that, as long as they're giving me interesting and useful information in support of our quest here at TFWP to help people move along to financial success. So here are some really interesting findings. We're talking about millennials, remember. The first set of questions, or the first set of findings, had to deal with savings, and they found that 25% of millennials have $100,000 in savings, up 16% from just 2 years ago. Way to go. Nice piece of work, millennials. $100,000 in savings. They found that 60%, which included the 25% obviously, had $15,000 or more in savings. Again, up 10% from 2 years ago. And that 73% of millennials are saving something, up 10% from just 2 years ago. So the savings component of millennial finance is getting much better. Way to go. Of course, that also means that 27% are still not saving, but that's, what do you say? Look on the bright side?
Well, sure. And most of these millennials are still living with their parents. So,
yeah, well,
that's why they have the bigger savings accounts.
I hope that they're, I hope if you're going to spend some time living with your parents that you're saving some money, right? You got to make some, make the hay while the hay's worth making, right? So, from a savings point of view, I think that's pretty good. That's pretty admirable. I'm sure it's all because they're listening to TFWP.
Oh, it's all you, Dave.
It's all me. Well, us, right? Mm-hmm. All us, And it's the information, but the more important reason, it's the jokes.
It's the jokes.
It's the jokes and the laughing, So savings goals. Here were some interesting findings. They found that retirement was the top goal, with 75% citing that their main priority was retirement, at least according to the report. I think that, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, that matches up with what we've done earlier in the FIRE movement and all that.
Sure. No, exactly. And for those of you that don't know what that is, go back to some prior episodes. There's one that's called Catch Fire or Catching Fire.
Catching Fire.
I think we've talked about it a couple times. A big movement, and it's becoming more and more important. I think that this makes sense as more employers are making retirement savings more seamless and automatic. I mean, even the Cal Savers thing that we talked about some years ago, it's becoming easier, and people are saving money through 401k plans, and I think that that's important, and it helps, especially if you've got a 401k plan at work where the employer has to match, because you're getting free money, you're getting another 3% or whatever it is. It's free money. So I think that that's great. Another 42% said that their savings were earmarked for travel, while getting into a first home was the main goal for 32%. Now, the interesting thing to me, Brian, was that it was more important, or there was a larger group of people that were saving for travel as opposed to getting into a home.
That's the millennial mindset, I think.
Yeah, experience over possession.
Over possessions. And that matches up again with that whole FIRE movement, is they don't want to work. And that makes sense. They're going to work now, and they're going to save.
Right.
So they can get out of the work field faster.
Right. No, I mean, I get that. And it also fits in with our, 5 steps for financial success, where we didn't say that acquiring a house was necessarily one of those elements, because there are people, apparently millennials, that don't think that's too important. In fact, only a third of the millennials thought that their savings was important in terms of getting into a house. Interesting.
They want to travel. Yeah.
Interesting.
Can't blame them.
Yeah.
World's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't know. I was working, I didn't get to Europe till 2 years ago. Can you believe that?
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's a pretty sheltered way of looking at life, and frankly, that's not good.
Yeah, but we do live in California.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I remember we were on the airplane coming back from Europe, and we'd just been through areas in the Mediterranean like Venice and Florence, and I mean all these places, Barcelona. And I was listening to the then President Obama say, we have a lot to be, satisfied about. Our country's been around, for like 220 years. And I'm thinking, Barack, I just saw the David statue that was carved like 2,000 years ago. They walked me by the alleged remains of St. Mark from 2,000 years ago. I've seen stuff that's like way older than 225 years. A different sense of perspective is my point. A more healthy sense of perspective, I think, is my point. So interesting stuff. Debt findings. Again, we said 25% of the millennials aren't saving anything at all. And our hope is that, people will listen to our podcast. Maybe people start saving a little bit more. Things will be a little bit healthier all the way around. The finding, they had a finding that over 3/4 of the millennials are saddled with debt. And 16% of the millennials hold more than $50,000 in debt, not including mortgages. So these are people that are holding big bags of debt, and I'll bet you what that debt is, right? Student loans.
Student loans.
The student loan. I mean, just it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So the findings were that debt is keeping millennials from meeting milestones. Well, that's true, and it's more than 3/4 of millennials who are carrying debt say it prevents them from achieving their personal financial goals, and that's true too. I mean, you listen to some of the political candidates that want to forgive all the student loan debt, and you say, well, and the one thing that they point to first and foremost is, look, it is preventing a large segment of our society from pursuing their financial goals, from buying houses, from buying cars, from even going out and being able to travel or do some of these other things, therefore cutting into the spending of the country and preventing the economy from expanding because they're not able to go out and buy goods and services. They're paying off debt. The finding was that 42% aren't able to buy a home, and 21% are putting off getting married, and another 21% are delaying having a baby, and that others are waiting longer to start a business or to move on to a more satisfying job. There was a finding that debt's keeping 18% from living on their own without support from their family or friends. So debt's keeping people in mom and dad's basement.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not a good thing.
No.
In the long term. So, if you're struggling with debt, any of our listeners out there, we don't have to tell you, but it's very hard to get a hold of that struggle. It's hard to get a hold of that curve, and that's why, debt being the killer that it is, it's why we emphasize it so much on the TFWP. Some other interesting findings. One was that over the past year, 39%. I want to get to the good stuff. I want to get back to the good stuff. I want to dwell on the stuff that needs improvement, although that needs to be mentioned. But over the past year, there was a finding that 39% of the millennials boosted their credit score. We've talked about that before. We're not big fans of credit and your credit score, but if it's something that you can improve, okay. 29% secured a raise. Loving that. 1/3 of the millennials got a raise, digging it, and 24% put more away for retirement. Another good, optimistic, wonderful thing for a group of millennials to achieve. Another finding was that millennials saving for retirement started doing that at 24 years old, earlier than the Gen Xers and the baby boomers. So that's a good thing. The millennials are thinking about retirement. They're thinking about money that's going to potentially double every 7 years, getting onto that and creating another cycle at the end of their life where their money can potentially double. And when money is compounding, it's the last cycle that's the most powerful, So they're getting into that sooner, and I hope that they're understanding that. There was a finding that 90% of millennials are willing to make sacrifices to achieve a financial goal, including cutting back on dining and eliminating vacations. Bummer. But good for them for willing to do it. But I could see cutting back on dining out a little bit, but eliminating vacations, like, I just told you I didn't travel much the first part of my life. So I think that's too bad. But if they're willing to do it so they can take more vacations later
on.
Yeah.
Everything is a gamble. You can work hard in the beginning and hope you're around.
To
enjoy it later on.
Yeah. I mean, it's a gamble. It's a gambit. Another finding was more than half regularly check their account balances and track their expenses. Duh. I mean, I hope so.
Yeah.
We're so about that. That I hope that more and more millennials are doing that. And there was a finding that 46% pay their credit cards in full each month. Again, I hope so. Most of this survey, most of the findings were really optimistic. I'm really liking it. Brian, we're like knocking it out of the park with the TFWP, man.
I wonder if the move towards travel is because of the internet.
Yeah.
When you and I were, growing up,
right?
We had I had an Encyclopedia Britannica.
Me too.
And there were
we had a Funkin' Wagnalls.
Oh, I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's the one that you bought at the supermarket. We weren't that well to do that we had a Britannica. That was like middle class. I think we were something other.
Uh-huh.
We had a Funkin' Wagnalls.
But if there's, with the exposure to these places that, we had TV.
Yeah.
But everything you saw on TV it's kind of an ethereal place. It's so far away. But
yeah.
I wonder, there's the internet. You can go there directly. You can see what other people are doing.
Right.
Maybe that's, the world has shrunk because of the internet.
And you can see video, and video conveys a more emotional, visceral image.
Of why you want to go to Bali or something like that.
Exactly. Why you want to go see the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
I think you're right. It's a smaller world. And as much as it's cool to see it on the internet, it's nothing like being there in person. Did you know that David, like one of his arms is bigger than the other? And it was supposed to like show the authority or the power of God or something like that? I don't
think I knew that.
You look at it and it
or the proportions are off intentionally.
The proportions were intentionally off.
I think I knew that, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah. So I mean, you look at it and you go, oh, I never, and you don't really pick that up from a picture. And by the way, he's mostly naked too. So just little tidbits here and there when you learn to travel around, you know. There was a finding that said that an overwhelming number of the millennials would rather buy a smaller house than a larger home at the top of their budget. And over half said that they would opt to stay in a less desirable job with higher pay than move to a more desirable job with lower pay. So, I mean, there's some push and some pull here.
Yeah, a lot of them, again, it's that FIRE movement. They want to get out.
Yeah.
So they'll take a higher paying, less satisfying job for a more intense, shorter period of time to have a longer time at the end and roll the dice they don't get hit by a bus. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was younger, I was willing to plan on living forever too, right? But it was a different mentality for us. Certainly a different mentality because, again, the thought was, go to college, work for a company 30 years, get your pension. I mean, there aren't even pensions
that long
anymore.
Yeah.
So a different world. I think the study gives us a real world's eye view into what the thinking of the millennial
goals are changing.
Yeah, no. And for the most part, good. I mean, we talked about some kind of bummer, kind of down things, but for the most part, good trends that I'm really pleased to see people pursuing.
Well done.
Good job, millennials. We're sure it's all because you've been listening to TFWP, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. We'll take all of the credit. This is Dave Hagan, and you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications. Let's listen in now as Dave answers some emails.
All right. Brian tells me that he's got a shorty.
It is a shorty, but I think it can be a goodie.
All right.
This is from one of our listeners named Todd, and he writes in, "Hi, Dave. I'm 25 and looking into life insurance policies. Do you recommend term or whole? Please advise. Thanks, Todd."
Well, Todd, how about this? Whole or life? How about none? How about none? I mean, you have someone talk to you, and someone who sells insurance, and they're telling you got to have this. And how about none? And think about it this way: if you're thinking about a whole life, that's more of an investment vehicle. And yes, someone can pencil out on a piece of paper with how it makes sense that it accrues value tax free. But I think you're better off putting some money in the market, in a mutual fund or an ETF, and following the market. Not necessarily an insurance company. I don't think you're going to get as much return. And I think you can do better if you're trying to save your money. And I think it would be more liquid. And I don't think you're going to end up paying a commission or a load. So if whole life is what you're thinking about, think about something else maybe. I'm not a fan of whole life. Now, term's a different thing. Term is really insurance. And term insurance pays if you pass away. But Todd, you're 25. Who is relying upon you for financial security? Now, if you got a kid, yeah, absolutely. If you got a spouse that doesn't work, yeah, you need a term policy. And we've said over and over, you want to get a policy that, that pays, 10, 12 times your annual income. So if something happens to you, your spouse or your kid have some type of financial security. But other than that, why? I see people who go out and buy term insurance and they're insuring like, Uncle Ned or Aunt Tilly. Well, why? They're not relying upon you for support. If something happens to you, they're going to be just fine. In fact, sometimes they might even be just happy that you're not around no more, So I think that those are two very limited circumstances. And I'm not a fan of whole. And if you don't have anyone that's dependent upon you, take the money that you otherwise would have spent and put it in a bank account or put it in a mutual fund or, an ETF and let it ride and let it grow. And from years from now, after it's doubled 2, 3, 4, 5 times, you'll be a happy camper that you sent this email in and we kept you away from buying a whole bag full of insurance.
Yeah, I don't think he has any dependents, or else usually people add that in the emails.
Yeah.
My wife and kid or something. So I'm wondering if he just got, an insurance ad got to him.
Yeah.
And he thinks he needs it.
Yeah. I've seen these policies, people come in, they go, well, this is to pay for the funeral. And I go, well, great. Statistics show that the average funeral is $8,000 these days, which is way too much. It can't cost $8,000 to take someone on a boat and throw them into the ocean, or put them in a box and bury it. I mean, that seems like an awful lot. It seems like an awfully extravagant kind of circumstance. But if you got $8,000, they can use that money to pay for your funeral. Or if your family really likes you, they can pay for the funeral. Of course, maybe they'll just throw you out in the ocean. Who knows? But I don't see where you need a policy necessarily for that either. And I've seen people, sold on these policies and financial security or what if. I don't know. Let's think it through very clearly what that insurance policy is supposed to do. Let's have a very clear eye as we're thinking about it, and then decide whether you want to buy it. And many times you don't. I'd rather see you save that money and make that part of your the future extravagance in your life, where you've got a big pile of cash that you can live on, or a big pile of cash that's generating interest that you can live on, and you'll have a good time. Hey, just go on a cruise. Don't buy a whole life policy. Go don't insure your death. Just go on a cruise, right?
Compound interest.
I know, right? We love it. We love that.
Compound interest.
So, not a big fan of the insurance. I hope that helps, Todd, and maybe that'll keep you from making a big mistake in terms of insurance. Don't have your insurance guy call me. We could have him on the show, but don't have him call me. I don't want to argue with an insurance person. And there is a point in the time for certain types of insurance, but I think sometimes we're oversold a little bit in this arena. Hope that helps, Todd. Thanks for writing in. All right, tune in next week. We're going to talk about a couple more lengthy emails. We've got an audio email and an international email. Our first email from offshore. We're international now. You're all listening to an international show, everybody. So that's a wrap. Have a great week. And you've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast.
You've been listening to the Financial Wellness Podcast, Dave's weekly message to keep you on your path to financial success. If you have a question that you would like Dave to answer on the podcast, go to thefinancialwellnesspodcast.com. You can leave an audio message with one click of a button, or type your message into the question box. Either way, it's sent right to Dave's phone. Remember, Dave will randomly draw from the submitted questions and pick the winner of a free 1-hour personal conversation with Dave to help you achieve your financial goals. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you receive the new episode notifications, or share the podcast via the app with your family and friends. This is your announcer, Nick Appel, wishing you every financial success.